So hello, it's Chris Brewerton here from Lichfield and Tamworth Chambers of Commerce. Welcome to our members, non-members and businesses watching this interview that is an ongoing part of our Lichfield and Tamworth in Focus campaign, where we sit down with various members over the course of the last 6 to 12 months, just to have a bit of an idea of what's happening in their world, both in Lichfield and Tamworth, but also the wider theme. I'm joined today by Paul Roberts of Keelys Solicitors. Paul, welcome.
Thank you.
Good to see you. And Paul is the head of the employment division at Keelys Solicitors in Lichfield, a really long-standing chamber member and a business that advises over 300 clients across the UK on employment law issues. They employ over 40 employees within their sort of Lichfield branch and work with local businesses like the Cathedral and the Garrick Theatre, of course, that we're all looking forward to going to visit in the next few weeks. Now they're open and ready to trade this week. Wanted to pick up with Paul on a few areas, key points with regard to the employment law, sort of more generally. We'll speak about the return to work and hybrid working, vaccinations and what businesses can and can't ask and do around that, and then the tribunal system and that sort of process that, of course, has changed so much over the last 12 months in terms of how that is done. So, Paul, it's great to have you here as our employment sort of expert. I know we did a webinar back in the mists of time last year, I think it was, and again, just shows how things change and how things move so quickly. So interesting to hear. Subject to where we are at the moment, just give us a bit of an idea and some of your advice, I suppose, for our members around that return to work and that hybrid working model that you're seeing and what you're hearing from your clients throughout the area.
Yeah, well, one of the challenges throughout this whole pandemic has been trying to untangle the changing advice from government and the mix of legal requirements from government and guidance. Yeah. Sometimes it's not entirely clear what is the law and what is just guidance, and it's changed on a regular basis. And strictly speaking, at the moment, employees can go to work, but the guidance remains they should work at home if possible. Mm-hmm. In the past, pre-pandemic, employees might often request to work from home, but the employer would often say, no, we don't think the job can be done from home. Over the last year, a lot of people have been able to prove quite effectively they can work from home, and so I think employers have often been converted to this idea. So at the moment, I think we're seeing a lot of clients asking people to come back into the office. And I think often employees now are happy to come back in and actually ready to come back in and meet their colleagues again. It can be quite isolating, working from home. But the other new concept we're seeing quite a lot of is what's become known as hybrid working, mm-hmm. Where employees work part of the week from home and part of the week in the office. And I think that can work well, for both sides really. The employee can save time, commuting into the office. But also when they're in the office, they can interact more effectively, with their colleagues. And a lot of our clients are doing that at the moment. And I think we'll probably continue doing that indefinitely, even once we're hopefully through this pandemic, because the benefits can work well for both sides. Mm-hmm. And so some of them have actually been proactive and going to staff and saying, well, you're welcome to work, let's say 2 days a week, from home if you want to. And then, legally, employees are still free to submit a flexible working request if they want even more flexibility. And it's up to the employer if they're willing to offer that or not. So my overall impression is that those arrangements are working well, and that most employers and their employees are able to find something that works well for both parties.
And I suppose that does, as you say, that comes down to that, that positive working environment and employers creating that, which then stops the issue we'll come on to on the tribunal side and discussions and disagreements, I suppose, around that. It's being that as clear as you possibly can under the current guidance, which at times isn't particularly clear, I suppose. So that's where the issues come in. But it's an interesting point and something we're all sort of going through at the moment. Do you see, I suppose, moving forward, as fingers crossed things are, continue to be relaxed, whatever that looks like, there being an even more important part for the employer to play in being as clear as possible when those restrictions continue to be lifted, whether that's beyond the 21st of June or a little later, depending on the government's sort of decisions in the next few days. How much of an effect do you see that changing the way businesses should communicate with their staff?
Well, I think it's good to be proactive and to, as the law and the guidance keeps changing, rather than wait for employees to come to you, to be on the front foot and to communicate your expectations, very clearly with them.
Yeah, and that's about communication as always. So, no, interesting, great stuff. No, thanks, Paul. And you mentioned again that communication. We come on to vaccinations. That was another key point you wanted to bring up, and something that you're seeing, sort of touched upon by a lot of your clients. Again, give us a feel and an understanding of what you're seeing from some of your client base around vaccinations and staff being or not being vaccinated.
Well, I mean, as a country, our route out of the pandemic is through vaccinations. And we're seeing in the news at the moment problems with the Indian variant, and to some extent the problem seems to arise from people who aren't being vaccinated. So that's a major issue out there in the country as a whole. Our clients are encouraging their staff to be vaccinated, and I think most employees are very happy to be vaccinated as soon as possible. But there's a few people for various reasons who are reluctant. And some of our clients, if they're working, for example, in the care sector, providing care for people, their most important responsibility is towards the people they're caring for, keeping them safe. And so some of them are saying to their staff, well, we're insisting that you are vaccinated when as soon as that's available to you. And actually, unless you've got a very good reason why you can't be vaccinated, we may have to terminate your employment. And unfortunately, they have had to terminate a few people's employment because, for example, one person was saying they didn't want the vaccine for religious reasons, but all the major world religions are encouraging people to be vaccinated. So this wasn't a mainstream religious view, it was quite obscure. And someone else was saying they simply didn't think the vaccine was safe. But again, all the NHS advice, all the scientific advice says that the vaccine is safe. Yeah. Or at least if there are any concerns around the vaccine, it's much safer to have the vaccine than to be out there, unvaccinated, especially when we have got these variants still, around the country. Yeah. So, on the whole, most employees, as I say, are queuing up to be vaccinated, but occasionally that has proved an issue. But our advice to clients is, well, as long as you can demonstrate you've got a good reason why you need to be vaccinated, unless the employee can come up with a very good reason as to why they can't be vaccinated, then you can take a stand and if needs be, terminate someone's employment.
Yeah, and I suppose that's there's various areas, but yeah, that's the crux of it. And then today, isn't it? It's following that official advice and that UK-wide advice, whether you're in Lichfield, Tamworth, or anywhere else for that matter, I suppose is important. But again, it does come down to that communications, as always, isn't it? I think is the key. So, interesting. But and I suppose the final point you wanted to cover was around the tribunal system, and obviously probably the most, I suppose, difficult part of your role is when you're in those positions with the discussions and the sort of disputes that have gone further. How has that changed during the time, and how do you feel that is going to sort of continue moving forward, as we go through this year?
Well, even before coronavirus struck last year, the tribunals had a massive backlog for various reasons. They were basically understaffed. And then we had coronavirus, which was a double whammy, if you like, for tribunals, because it meant a lot of their staff then couldn't come into the office and they weren't really set up to work from home. Yeah. So to a large extent, the system just ground to a halt. At the same time, you've got employers out there making lots of redundancies and doing other things that led to tribunal claims. So the volume of claims went up just as the tribunal system wasn't equipped to deal with them. Yeah. So we've now got an absolutely massive backlog. And I used to be able to say to people, roughly you could expect to get to a hearing in 6 months. Now it could be a year or more, which for employees in particular, wanting to get compensation is obviously not ideal. But part of the solution to that, the tribunals have developed something called CVP, Cloud Video Platform, which is basically their own system of like Zoom. Yeah. And this achieves two things. First of all, hearings can take place in a socially distanced way, so we can all sit in our homes or offices, so it's much safer in terms of transmission of the virus. But also it creates much more capacity for the tribunal, because they've got plenty of judges. What they haven't got is enough rooms for the judges to actually sit in.
Yeah.
But this gives you, effect, in a virtual way, much more capacity. And I actually had my first hearing on one of these new systems a couple of weeks ago. And I was quite nervous, actually, because although I've been doing tribunal hearings for 20 years, suddenly doing it online, I wasn't sure quite how that was going to work. But actually, it worked very well. I could sit in my office in Lichfield rather than having to go into Birmingham. My client could sit in their home as it happened. And actually, it worked well for all of us. So I've been converted to that. And the tribunals have said they're likely to carry on with this even after coronavirus has passed. So some hearings will still take place in person, but lots of hearings will now take place remotely for years to come. And actually, I think that will work well for all of us, especially employers. They can sit in their own offices, which is much more convenient. But actually, I think it's less daunting giving evidence, for example, sat in your own home or your own office, rather than in a courtroom. So I think that will work well for everybody.
And obviously help with the backlog and help with that issue there that faces employers and employees in probably equal measure, isn't it, in terms of those cases, continuing for longer than the usual 6 months, a 12-month case, I'm sure does cause a lot of stress and frustration and anxiety and time and all those other things, I suppose.
It's a bigger issue for employees because they're the ones who want to get the case to court. But it's not ideal for employers either, because you'll be giving evidence about something that maybe happened 18 months ago. It can be quite hard to remember what happened 18 months ago.
Yeah, absolutely.
Or the other problem might be, let's suppose a manager has dismissed somebody. What if that manager themselves is no longer employed by the time you get to a tribunal hearing? That can be a major problem for the employer. So it's better for everybody if these cases can reach a hearing sooner rather than later. Yeah,
absolutely. And I suppose that's on a positive note, that's seeing that the backlog is slowly dropping off and things are starting to get starting to improve and hopefully that continues, Paul. So no, it's a pleasure to have you with us this morning. I suppose just to finish on one point, looking positively towards the future, are you broadly confident around the employment situation across the local area and wider? Is that are you finding that things will move forward positively from where you're sitting?
I think so. I mean, looking back to this time last year, we were very nervous about our own business, but also many of our clients' businesses. The most important thing is that 99% of them have survived. Financially, we've seen very few clients go bust. Some have had to make redundancies, but not too many. And hopefully, my impression now is that things are improving as the economy starts to unlock and things open up again. So, we're positive, and I think most of our clients are positive as well.
Best way to end that, Paul. Thanks so much for your time. Absolute pleasure, and we'll look forward to seeing you, hopefully in person one day in central Lichfield, perhaps under the spires of the cathedral in the summer sunshine. We shall see.
I look forward to it. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Paul. Absolute pleasure.
Okay, bye then.